Good afternoon. I want to thank our participants for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and in the interest of everyone's time, we'll have a hard stop at 1 hour, more or less. Our role is to listen to you. Participants have been forwarded questions, so we'll jump right into these questions. This is the session on available technology platforms meeting. We have a great set of panelists today to discuss their views on maritime transportation data and requirements that their companies utilize and track. So I look forward to hearing from them. These meetings are being recorded, will be posted on the FMC YouTube page and on the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative MTDI webpage. Please, if one of the participants chooses to share something, use the share function. I think Miles is going to do that so that the public will be able to review the information. I also want to point out that this is a live public meeting. Only participants will be able to speak. We will be posting the meeting on the MTDI webpage for public access. However, we welcome and in fact encourage public input. I'd love to see more comments from the public on what we're trying to do here. You can email us your feedback on data gaps and data needs at maritimedata@fmc.gov. Should you choose to submit public feedback, please reference whether it is in reference to an individual meeting or whether it is a general comment. Also, we will be posting submitted materials and comments on our webpage. We cannot post PowerPoint, so we ask that material be submitted in Word or PDF format. Please do not include any personal identifiable information, PII, on any submission to the FMC. We will continue these meetings every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, leading up to our FMC Data Transportation Initiative Summit this spring. We're aiming for a mid-June timeframe. And last week, we had a really good meeting with Maritime Labor. I appreciate their willingness to participate. If you haven't seen it, please look at the FMC YouTube channel and on our webpage. This is our 11th meeting, and today we're hearing from representatives who work with available technology and platforms. I'd like to hear a little bit about your companies and how you use data, and then going to the questions that we provided you. And if we have time, we'll have a little dialogue. We have scheduled participants: Tim McLaughlin, Vice President, Trade, Analytics, and Industry Solutions, Maritime and Trade and Supply Chain, he tells me today. And he's from S&P Global, used to be IHS Market, and recent change. Tom Hallwell, Product Manager, Government for Lloyds List, a longtime maritime periodical and covering maritime industry. Miles, oh gosh, I'm going to kill it. Verghese, Cargologic. I got it okay, he says, co-founder and CEO. He's also done a lot of work in the terminal sectors on operating systems there. And a good friend, Gordon Downs, Chief Executive Officer of NISHACS, a shipping exchange, one of the few working on strengthening the contractual structures in ocean shipping and utilizing information to make a contracting process more valuable. So I'm going to start it off with Tim. Again, don't worry if each other's comments bolster or buttress the comments made by others, and be flexible in commenting on what you think has been left unsaid. And with that, Tim, it's up to you. You're first.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Bensel, and thank you to the other panelists for joining. I look forward to our discussion, and for everyone else who's joining the panel. As Commissioner Bensel said, I lead the Trade Analytics Division within our Maritime and Trade Supply Chain business. And essentially, we have data, information services, and expertise that help a wide range of industry verticals, from government to transportation logistics providers, ports, and shippers. We offer, AIS vessel tracking data, so we track any vessel anywhere in the world in near real time through our network of terrestrial and satellite antennas. We have a ships database and both macro and micro trade statistics. So we generally help with supporting general maritime domain awareness, evaluating global trade, helping corporates find new vendors, find new customers, and generally we provide that data through either flat file delivery, API access, or one of our many online products. So I look forward to discussing the different aspects of what we do with everyone today.
You want to talk about the questions?
Yeah. Go ahead and go right straight into the questions, Tim. So what we'll do is each one will speak a little bit about their company and then go straight into the questions, and then we'll turn to the next one. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So one of the questions was around what key data elements are integral into our operations, and it really depends on the data asset that we're looking at. Be it that I'm in the trade analytics division, the real key data elements that we have are trading countries. So we track the official volume and value of merchandise trade between countries that we source from over 100 countries. It's often used by governments and trade associations to facilitate global trade, put assignment of tariffs on goods. So the key data inputs for us are country, trading country, commodity, or we use the harmonized tariff schedule or HTS system for the indexing of our commodities or merchandise. We also have micro trade database, otherwise known as bill of lading data, that tracks granular details about import trade activity for 12 markets. So this will include things like shippers, transportation logistics firms, product names within the commodities. So these are the key data points, and it's one of the main value adds that we bring to our clients is just how we cleanse and standardize that data. The data in its natural format is extremely raw. It can be difficult to manage. So we have a rigorous data cleansing and standardization process that adds these standards to things like ports and using UN low codes. Also for our company data, which is probably one of the more difficult ones to manage, the company indexing is really important for us. So doing things like categorizing it by DUNS numbers, so using D&B numbers for both public and private companies. This allows us to pull in DUNS information, unique IDs like DUNS number, but also company revenue, parent, subsidiary, hierarchical information. So really, a lot of that indexing allows us to join our data sets to other data sets and facilitate the analysis of what we do. And lastly, we do a lot of enhancements and calculations on top of our data. So for example, our transportation logistics clients are really focused on market share, right? So looking at market share by trade lane, in and out of the US is one of the primary areas of focus. So trade to, waterborne trade to and from the world. And we derive TEUs or 20-foot equivalent units, which helps those clients with their market share evaluation. So really, I'll say how we standardize, how we index, and then how we enrich the data is key for clients' ability to use it in a friendly way and to make sense of it. With that, I'll pass it along to one of the next.
So you just keep on going. Go through all your questions.
Go through all the questions. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we'll do one at a time, and then
all right.
So we'll.
Yeah, no problem.
You're lucky because sometimes you're going to say the same thing that they want to say. So, but you're the first name on the list. So.
All right, great. Yeah, no problem. So one of the next questions is around export data, and we're really uniquely positioned, I think, when looking at the export data market. So, as I was mentioning, we have global macro export data. So we track import and export data out of almost every country, and that's through our monthly trade statistics database. But where we're unique specifically is on the bill of lading data side, and a product that's been known as PEERS, or the Journal of Commerce, over the years, where we've been grandfathered into the data collection process for U.S. export. So when I started with the company over 10 years ago, there was a staff of about 50 people that physically went into customs houses to collect paper bills of lading, believe it or not. And this is to capture the U.S. export market. Imports into the U.S. are automated by customs through the automated commercial environment, or the ACE program. But 10 years ago, exports were predominantly still filed via paper. We would go in, collect these documents, and either scan them or data enter them into our proprietary software, and then put them through additional optical character recognition processes and essentially convert them into data. In 2012, Customs rolled out the Document Imaging System program, or the DIS program, that some of you may be familiar with. We partnered with Customs to ensure that this program was rolled out in as high quality and an efficient manner as possible. So as a result of this program, we were able to minimize that staff. Now it's about 24 employees that have to go into the ports, but we collect a majority of containerized volume through this DIS program, which is essentially a daily XML feed that has PDFs of bills of lading embedded in the XML. And then we extract those PDFs and put them through the OCR process. We have templates for every given ocean carrier, so we can auto capture as many data points on the physical bills of lading as possible, or the PDFs, before we ingest them into our rawest database form. So this is around 500,000 pages a month, 6 million pages a year on the export side. But still, we have folks going into customs houses in the ports of Houston and LA and Long Beach and so on, collecting any mostly non-containerized cargo that is still being filed at the port. And we're working with customs presently to further automate that process into the automated commercial environment. So that's pretty exciting for us on the export side. What do we not have that would help improve our efficiency and performance? One of the first things that comes to mind for us is improved product or commodity data that's also tied to HS code. So to give some background, when we receive a bill of lading from the government to track import-export data, we get a free text field with the merchandise that was on the bill of lading, right? So it can be extremely vague. It could say chemicals, or it could be extremely granular and say it's low linear density polyethylene or something along those lines, right? So we have a proprietary algorithm that uses machine learning to look for HS codes in the text and also identify keywords and weight them, essentially to parse out all of the goods that are in those containers or on that ship, because our clients want to get insights into each of the individual records that are on the bill of lading. So this is a in-depth process that will structure the database and assign the HS code down to the 6-digit level, which is the international standard wherever possible. But if it can't, it'll go to the 4 or 2-digit level, which makes it a more broad classification. But why that's important is that we're always looking for reference data to feed our machine learning model to better do this HS code assignment and be more accurate in how we do it. An example is when Red Bull, the energy drink, was rolled out, the algorithm would have been assigning this to live animals, right? It sees bull, it says this is a Red Bull, I'm going to put it into live animals. Until we feed it reference data to say this is indeed an energy drink, right? We have to reclassify it into the right HS code. So as you can imagine, products are continually being rolled out. These kinds of challenges are facing us when we're processing the US trade data. So that's just an example of if we are able to obtain, which we're constantly on the hunt for, more accurate and relevant reference data that has product names, grades of products, and any sort of associated HS code, it'll improve our ability to do this HS code assignment, which in turn makes the data easier to use by the global community. I think next we're on to data transmission and access. So how do we get data from other parts of the supply chain? And really, we're input agnostic, right? We have a number of different ways in which we source data. I mentioned physical documents that are scanned or data entered into our proprietary software. We take inputs via XML. We have PDFs that we put through optical character recognition that we get via the XML. We access data via various APIs, flat file delivery from some of our partners. And we even have web scraping services. It's not really something that we do much, but we have the ability within S&P Global to do web scraping where it's allowable, and we have an agreement with a third party, with a partner to do that. So really, we're able to take any inputs and store them into our database before we do any additional cleansing and standardization, and then make this data available to our clients. And then the last question is around how do we distribute data to our clients? So similarly, we try to meet our clients where they're at in terms of level of sophistication. So we have some clients that have many users, and they will access our data and services through one of our online platforms. So we have a number of different online platforms that help with vessel risk and compliance, forecasting commodity trade flows, as well as supply chain evaluation, monitoring trade flows, seeing who the suppliers are, who conversely are the buyers, and this kind of thing. So any one of our number of online tools can be used to interrogate our data, access the data, or even extract the data in some instances. Then we have clients that are sophisticated, relatively sophisticated, and they just want to access data via API, which we can get them set up with, and they query the data essentially at their leisure and based on their need. And then other partners will take the data from us via flat file, and so CSV or text file. And what we'll do is we will load that data into an AWS S3 bucket and grant the clients access to the data via S3, or we'll push out those files via FTP or SFTP so they can be downloaded by the client. So both from the data input side and data output side, we're relatively agnostic, but we try to service the clients based on where they're at and what they're looking to do with our services.
Thanks, Tim. Before we go on, I would ask one question. A lot of as people would be shocked, I think, to understand that the federal government really doesn't collect that much information about shipping on its own. It's mostly in the private sector, the information, especially in transit. And the only things that I'm aware that's really affirmatively collected is the customs manifest entry information and export data, and then Coast Guard's vessel arrival data. And on the transport side, on the intermodal side, nothing's collected. It's all left to state DOTs, so we don't really have any information about movement that the federal government monitors. So how difficult is it to access the private sector? I mean, because they're in control of the vast majority of data related to the movement of cargo. Can you give me an assessment of how difficult it is to get that information? Some of it, like AIS, is commonly available, but others require some hunting and pecking. So what's
Yeah, it depends. It's a good question, Carl. It depends on the data set. So for the bill of lading style data, the import-export data, on the import side, it's not necessarily difficult. The difficulty is in the ingestion, the processing, the cleansing and standardization, and the ease of making that data easy to use. And because we've been doing that for several decades now, we've built up a robust process to make that data well organized. On the export side, higher barrier to entry, because you need to have optical character recognition capabilities. You're processing 6 million transactions through this OCR a year, so it can be done, but significant investment needs to be put into the servers associated with that, templates, the staff that's reviewing each page to ensure complete data capture and that kind of thing. On the AIS side, similarly, there's a lot of free providers out there, essentially raw data, but where we add value is that we have a network of 3,000 terrestrial land antennas that we own to track ships across the globe. And we have a partnership with a satellite provider called Exact Earth, which has about 50 to 60 low orbit satellites to help us in highly congested areas and out in the deep ocean. And then we just started using vessel data, so signal, on the vessel. But so we use 3 sources to essentially triangulate where the vessel is and then track any ship over 100 gross metric tons at any given location. But the real value for us comes in 2 things. One, we have a robust staff that's looking at this data, cleaning it, standardizing it again. But 2, we're a shipping authority in that we issue the IMO number on behalf of the International Maritime Organization for every vessel. So we have an extremely robust ships database where we index over 600 data points associated to each ship. And then we use that data to validate the AIS data to a certain extent so that we feel, we have the most comprehensive and timely product available. So you can track a ship every couple of seconds if you want, where some other services out there would be a lot more latent, less comprehensive, difficult to use. So long-winded way to answer your question, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of the 2 different areas in the maritime side and the trade side.
Okay, Tom, you're up next up. Give us the perspective from Lloyds List, longtime periodical that we've been reading in the Maritime Circle for decades. What's your views? Go ahead and provide a little perspective on the company, and then go into the questions and answer as you see fit.
Absolutely, Commissioner Bensel. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everyone. Really, really good to get the opportunity to talk with all of you today. Just a quick clarification. So Lloyds List is a really, really important part of what we do in the organisation that I represent. But I guess I'm really here with my Lloyds List intelligence hat on today, which predominantly assists our clients with vessel tracking, vessel characteristics data, spotting of compliance risks as well. So those will be the main capabilities I'm going to talk through today. I'll start with a quick introduction, and then I'll move through the list of questions in a pretty systematic way. So my name's Tom Holwell. I'm a product manager here at Lloyds List Intelligence, predominantly responsible for the work that we're doing in the government sector. So what I'll do today is I'll give some pretty direct answers to the questions provided, and I'll highlight some of the key data elements that we use to construct our own services, and some of the challenges that we face as part of this. I'll also spend a bit of time running you through some of the key areas that we've identified as being particularly important for the customers that we're supporting over the next few coming years. Quick introduction of the organisation before I go any further. So obviously the Lloyds List name is very, very well known, but to introduce Lloyds List Intelligence, we're one of the leading providers of maritime intelligence. We have been over the last 300 years. And we currently provide about 4,000 customers with both traditional maritime intelligence data sets. So that could be AIS positions, data on vessel characteristics, data on ports and places of interest. And we also provide slightly more complex and forward-looking intelligence, which is derived from machine learning. Our top level aim in all of this essentially is to give our customers as much detail as they need, predominantly on risks in the maritime domain. So it could be a government customer of ours is looking to proactively understand security risks posed by vessels of interest, or it could be a customer in the commodities sector looking to understand maritime compliance risks or risks associated with port congestion. I'm going to jump straight into the first question. So the key data elements for us are the sources that we're using to contribute towards the intelligence we're providing. I know that's a really obvious thing to say, but I'll expand on it in a little bit more detail. So we have a large terrestrial AIS network that we directly own and we're continually investing in. And we also have partnerships with leading satellite AIS providers. So we partner with Spire and Orbcom. And these are absolutely critical for us too. We source our vessel characteristics information from about 150 sources, and I won't run through all of them. But this includes commercial registries, flag state registries, and class societies. Across all of this, we have dedicated analyst team who are solely there to work across these data sets, as well as the raw streams of AIS information. And what they're doing is validating and structuring them to make sure that they provide insights to our customers that are as timely, accurate, and as easy to ingest as possible. One of the most critical sources that we have at Lloyds List Intelligence is our Lloyds agent network, and they are absolutely critical for us on a day-to-day basis. And this is a team of 500 agents, which are based across about 170 locations. And we use them as a further means of validating information on vessel characteristics and movements. Lastly, we also have a dedicated geospatial data team, and they're solely here to make sure that our information on ports and places of interest is as granular in detail as it possibly can be. We provide all of these foundational data sets directly to our customers. So we use them as the basis for our more advanced insights too. And these are advanced insights that are derived predominantly from machine learning. And they look at predictive vessel behaviors, as well as potentially suspicious vessel activity that might constitute a compliance risk to our customers. And these have become absolutely integral in terms of the deliverables that we're providing to our customers on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to jump onto the second question. I'll probably move through this relatively quickly. So in terms of what are the key data elements that are integral to export for us? Well, I said it'll be pretty quick. The data we provide is consistent regardless of whether it concerns imports or exports. We focus on the means of conveyance for goods predominantly, rather than the specific goods that are being conveyed. The next question, though, I'll be a little bit more detailed on. So it's a really interesting one for us. So what data do you not currently have access to that would improve your performance? And this is something, to be honest, as a product manager, that I'm continuously thinking about. And ultimately, a huge amount of our direction comes from the continual feedback that we're undertaking with our customers. So firstly, I will say that one of the most important things that we undertake to ensure our performance is obviously continual investment into our foundational data sets. And probably the best example of this is our terrestrial AIS network, which we're investing in as kind of a fixed part of our capital expenditure every single year to make sure that we're expanding in key areas for our customers and also maintain the highest levels of uptime too. We're also really conscious, I think, going back to this point about investing in our foundational capabilities. If we're talking about machine learning derived capabilities, they are for us absolutely a case of quality in, quality out. You can't talk about machine learning capabilities without talking about the foundational data that they're based on. It's absolutely critical. And if you are talking about those kind of capabilities, customers need to be reassured that they're getting their insights from ultimately data which is of the absolute highest quality. We are investing heavily in machine learning and advanced analytics, and this is ultimately to help our customers predict likely vessel behaviors. So particularly understanding where a vessel is likely to arrive as far in advance as possible. This is something which we're grappling with at the moment, actually. We found that 57% of vessels in 2021, this was by reviewing our own AIS data, were sailing with either an inaccurate or unclear destination stated in their AIS transmission. And we also found that obtaining accurate ETAs was similarly problematic. The tools that we're investing in to help us understand these areas more proactively should have direct knock-on impacts for our customers too, in terms of understanding vessel behaviors in a slightly more forward-looking, proactive manner. I'll answer the next two questions pretty quickly. So how do we get the data that we need from other parts of the supply chain, and does this create inefficiencies? Well, as one of my previous answers provided some detail on, we're sourcing information from a vast array of sources. So we have our own terrestrial AIS network. We integrate satellite AIS data from our partners through an API service. We also have over 150 secondary sources that we're using to populate our data on vessel characteristics and ownership. What this means is that we have a continual stream of data coming in. We also have a continual stream of information coming in from our human sources, the Lloyds agent network. And we have automated mechanisms in place for initial screening and validation of this data. But for everything else that we're doing, we're using dedicated analysts to verify and present information to our customers in the most useful manner. It's a continual day-to-day process that we're undertaking really to do that, and it requires constant focus and investment. The very last question I'll be quite brief on. So how are we providing data to our customers? Well, we're making it available through our online platform, through API services, through FTP services. We're seeing a lot of demand in terms of customers integrating our data into their own third-party platforms. But in terms of how we deliver our data, we're really providing it in whatever format our customers want. We're very flexible in terms of how we're providing our data on a day-to-day basis. That's it from me. So in terms of running through the allocated questions, I hope it provided a bit of insight and didn't come across like too much of a sales pitch. I guess the thing is, a lot of the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis are ultimately derived from us trying to respond to the direct challenges that our customers are facing. So it was unavoidable in a way, but that's it from me.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's sort of stunning when you think that 57% of the vessels that you're tracking don't end up in the place that they say they're going to go. And you do cover a much wider segment of shipping than, for instance, the containerized market, where they're going back and forth. But it seems to me that we can get some information about where a vessel is, but we don't really have a lot of great information about what their status is and what their arrival times are. And, I think we're going to have to look much closer at that, especially with this containerized industry status reports. Right now, they're coming in emails to the ports about when they anticipate arriving. And that's probably not the best thing. And given that it's so easy to track them, should be better. Miles Verghese is going to give us an interesting perspective, because he's done a lot of work in the terminal operating segment and sector. And so you and Gordon have probably a little bit different perspective from the other two, but really good experience in cargo terminals. And so why don't you go ahead now?
Thank you, Commissioner Bensel and team. Thank you for having me. Love the work that you guys are doing on and having these panels. If I may, Commissioner Bensel, it looks like my screen sharing is disabled. Carl, I don't know if you can help me with that as well. If not, I can just speak to it like everyone else, but I thought, visual could help further along.
So why don't we try to do that? And
Okay.
why don't you go ahead and start and
Okay.
with your comments, and maybe tell a little bit about your company, and then
Sure.
we'll see if we can catch up with you.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good. Hi everyone. My name is Miles Varghese. I'm co-founder and CEO. I like to say enterprise sales guy from early stage startups. Turned co-founder, stepping into this role, leading a freight forwarding platform company. But before I jump, completely into answering the questions, I feel like through my career working with port terminals and then later on with these independent small to medium freight forwarders, I found a lot of common themes that I think continues to play out throughout the entire supply chain, which also leads up to the questions at hand here. But I think the common focus that I've seen working with these smaller, small to medium independent terminals, right? They were ignored historically. They were largely ignored because the main providers and the provider that ended up acquiring us, Navis, ended up acquiring us specifically around our user experience and our interface because we were good about designing quality software, for these complex port terminal environments. And then the smaller players really came online, right? So we're talking smaller inland container depots, river terminals, even mixed cargo terminals. They advanced quite quickly, especially abroad in the Caribbean, very tied, of course, to the Americas. Trade in itself, is international. But web-based technology, 3G access, access to the cloud, the shift from software as a service, off of on-premise systems, which houses a lot of risk, has changed. Where today, the reason why I'm here and why I also joined CargoLogic specifically was because we are working with these small to medium independent freight forwarders and brokers. So while I was at Octopi building these port terminal operating systems, SaaS terminal operating systems in the cloud, basically, the pen, paper, the Excel spreadsheets, the pictures of cargo damages, all the administrative stuff on the back end, communicating with the shipping lines, in and out of containers, changing seals, stripping, stuffing, you name it. We kind of hyper-focused as we developed that application and found that this segment of the market needed a lot of help. So when the opportunity for me came to join my co-founder in CargoLogic, I was already sitting at the terminal, developing port terminal operating systems, learning from them, and building software for these independent terminals that couldn't afford the heavy capex. And really, couldn't really dive into, a new terminal operating system either because of the cost, or it would have been too difficult for them to change it. We built this really lightweight software that can help accelerate and improve the flow of cargo through these terminals. In a little over 2 years, we were acquired by Navis, the company that ended up, that acquired us, actually invented the terminal operating system in 1982. So a lot has changed for these small to medium terminals. And similarly, as we sat with the forwarders and the brokers at these terminals, found that they also encountered a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same problems, that they had to deal with. Right. So specifically around CargoLogic, fast forwarding to today, where we are specifically focused on these independent players that are still also kind of similar to the terminals on pen, paper, and Excel, sometimes older systems that aren't integrated too well. Often these mom and pop freight forwarding, boutique operating freight forwarders and brokers around the globe, the same people that make up Miami, Chicago, LA. They're sometimes using other systems, and we have to integrate with those other systems. So whether it's Magaya, Descartes, or CargoWise, really, it comes down to this digital customer experience, which is quickly becoming more and more mainstream as a segment itself, within the industry, and something that, pretty much, whether you're a larger player or a smaller one, building quality systems has become more important than it's ever has been. And then what I saw as parallels between both of these systems was really simplifying things, right? Giving folks that were using customers of our customers, right? So whether you're the terminal, the forwarder, access to their information, real-time alerts, EDI, notifications, and have them communicating with other systems. So I feel like the shift is actually happening now, as we speak, and a lot of these companies and organizations, have been working and trying to solve the supply chain crisis, but we've run into obstacles, which naturally leads us, into the questions here, which I can be, pretty straightforward, and we'll pretty much fly through. So open for any questions, Commissioner Bensel and team. But what are the key data elements that are integral to our operations? Taking a step back, CargoLogic is almost like a Slack or a Microsoft Teams. It's not built to replace your core cargo operating system, your WMS, or any existing system is built to actually live on top of what you're already doing in the day-to-day, from the commercial services perspective as an independent forwarder or broker. So that means, a lot of quoting, a lot of booking, a lot of tracking of shipments, juggling 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, who knows how many. The smaller you are, the more you have to juggle, the more important it is that you need to pay attention to everything. And so for us, what we're trying to do is actually glean and gather as much data and insights, whether it's coming by API or spreadsheet, and to massage that data and make it useful to these mom and pop operations, as well as the larger players. So what does that information sort of look like? Getting access to the bill of lading information, visibility, as they call it, milestone location data, terminal operating system data, which is tough to normally grab data from, but those sort of solutions are kind of coming online, where you do have great companies that their full-time role is basically to scrape these terminal operating systems and to cut deals with them to provide you demurrage, dwell time, some of this more detention demurrage costs, some of these more business friendly tools to help you as an independent forwarder and broker with your day-to-day operation. And a huge portion of that is also transparency and sharing that information, with your end customers, right? So your shipper as the freight forwarder or broker, in our case, your shipper being able to also, share information quite easily up and down the value chain with partners as well as customers. And as no two forwarders are the same. So it's very rare that you find, two freight forwarders that aren't belonging to the same organization that are using the same systems or operating the same way. It varies depending on region. It varies depending on trade lane. Really hard to build a system that universally can work, around the world, which is one of the things we're striving to do. So we're ingesting, not only US, sort of market needs, but those around the globe. And then leading to point 2, what data elements are integral, right? So all this operational information, but in addition to the market information and intelligence, also the business info. And what I mean by business info, having a WhatsApp integration, where the next time someone texts you, "Where's my cargo?" being able to grab that information and to route it, into a platform where you can kind of see it with all your other alerts, and make sense out of it. Having a Gmail or an Outlook plugin that's going to be able to automatically take these conversations you're having with customers and to route them into, CRM-like system that's going to help you work better with your customers. So that's the question for number 2. We want to get the CRM data, first, last name, phone number, the shipper, the consignee, the notify. We want, and are ingesting all the information around your quoting, your bookings, and your shipments. And we're also pulling this information. If you have existing system like a CargoWise, Descartes, or Magaya, we can grab that information, pull it as well. And for number 3, which data do we not currently have access to that would improve our performance? Seems like the last sort of holdout amongst the US supply chain from our conversations, as we've reached out to other private companies as well that are providing this type of API data. Intermodal and rail data is very difficult to kind of find. Some companies have found success doing it, but even these companies, these other startups that have found success doing it, they often charge still a little too much for these mom and pop brokerages and operations, and there needs to be something a little more lightweight. So we're hoping and starting to see a lot more of these terminal data, rail data, intermodal data, visibility updates sort of come online, but that seems to be a holdout. Rail among all the modes, and no offense to anyone that's on rail, seems to be the last holdout from a technical perspective, and that which is the toughest right now. And what do we not currently have access to that would improve efficiency and performance, right? Like I mentioned, this rail terminal data, intermodal. Our customers are asking us, on the East Coast, hey, how long is this going to take, to get from the West Coast to the East Coast? Did it hit the warehouse yet? Where is it specifically? And unless, you've got an integration with a GPS company, which can be done, you're not going to be able to get that high quality visibility data that everyone is sort of, fighting for. And our goal is to kind of democratize, make things better, cheaper, and faster for everyone. So this terminal data is coming online, like I mentioned, and this is why us specifically need it. And then leading to point 2 around topic 2 around data transmission and access. How do we get the data from other parts of the supply chain? Currently, good old fashioned, like everyone kind of mentioned, these flat file importers, spreadsheets. So you export data out of whatever system you have. Take that data in your spreadsheets, map each column to that which is in our template, and then upload our template into the system. And we make it very user friendly, and human friendly, I should say, to walk you through that process. So that's kind of what we've done is just really helping these smaller companies import and process a lot of these spreadsheets, but we can't support XML. We do have API integrations along with these XML integrations as well. So if you've got a more robust system, you're much more, maybe a more advanced organization, a media-sized organization, we can interface with, in those scenarios as well, where we're integrating directly on top of the existing platforms, too. And then very soon, right now, we actually do not have EDI, because we're also very careful not to emulate what's already being done in the supply chain with other companies and other vendors. But commercial APIs, like I mentioned, getting access to more terminal data, more rail data, some of these business metrics that are slowly coming online, and being able to package that and to serve it, with our visibility updates, alerts, is very important for us. And last but not least, how do we provide the data to our customers? We look at it from a business and a systems perspective. From a business perspective, right, where we're grabbing these existing systems, working through APIs, through flat files, through spreadsheets, and then ingesting that and helping our clients and our customers to work with that data. And then through web-based applications, right, and customer experience, and more specifically around customer experience, the user interface. How do these screens look like? What does the branding look like? What do these custom emails look like? How easy is it for that shipper who's got 9 or 10 other logins to create a login, or why would they create another login? So really kind of dealing with a lot of these structural challenges that this industry has. And the smaller you go, where there's just a general, sort of pushback, when it comes to technology. How do you get these, more analog shippers that prefer to just text you and call you? And how can you get them, into the system? So that's a big part of what we're doing. And a lot of that comes from the business aspects, where, you're just making it that much more relevant for them and showing them, hey, not only do you get access to the visibility, but you get all your documents, all your communication in one place too. So really designing the application, through product-led growth, they call it, from a technical perspective, is very important to us. And of course, the systems perspective, if you got another system, right, we're not trying to emulate those. We'd much rather integrate with those other existing systems, which right now is also very costly, as you might imagine, and also leads to higher costs for our customers. If there was a way and a standardization, around that data, where all, applications were able to kind of flow and transmit to one another, I mean, that's a one humongous step in the right direction. And I feel like we're already trending in that direction, thanks to the good work, Commissioner Bensel, you and your team are doing. But for us, it's the business aspect, taking the real world, day to day, too many calls, texts, and emails, right? How do you navigate through all those calls, texts, and emails, and make for a better experience at the commercial, level, and deliver more transparency, but also, from the system side of things, right? If you have an existing system, it's really tough, right? As an incumbent, operating forwarder or broker, especially the smaller you are with the limited budget, it's really hard to shift to another system. So how can you augment your current systems and still make, a solution relevant? Those are the types of things that are important for us when it comes to data transmission and access. But that closes out, my presentation, to you guys. But appreciate the time and appreciate your guys' consideration.
Miles, that was great. I really appreciate those comments. I think you mentioned every single type of data except maybe a carrier pigeon. So, but I agree with you on your assessment on the rail and intermodal side. More on the trucking side, chassis and tracking of drayage. Trucking is going to be a challenge, but I've talked to the companies, and they're interested in how they can overcome some of those. I was in Chicago at the rail yards last week. So we've televised the last two, from one in LA and the ports of LA, and another at the rail yards in Chicago. But they definitely have data, and they have it in a form that can be transmitted in a way that would be productive for your use. And educating your clients. And so I think there's some hope. We have data. It's just standardizing the terminology and accessibility to that. So Gordon Downs, Chief Executive Officer, NISHACS. Gordon's a good friend. He's been working on the contracting process and utilizing technology to ensure that contracts are enforceable, and that there is real objectives in achieving the service of transportation. So, Gordon.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bensel. It's great to be here, and I think the initiative that the Commission is undertaking, looking at the data, is very valuable for everyone in the industry. So commend you and everyone else who's working on this. So before we dive into the questions, I just wanted to quickly explain in a little more detail what we do at NISHACS. So we're a shipping exchange, and we have one mission, and that's to enable shipping to become more reliable through more effective digital contracts. And basically what that boils down to is helping both carriers and shippers comply with the terms of the contract. So NISHACS does 4 things very briefly. Number 1 is we have some standards, standard from contracts, standards around the rules for how contracts are administered, enforced, etc. Number 2, and of course very relevant to this conversation, we gather a lot of data to help both the carrier and shipper see how the contract is performing. And this, of course, is a major challenge for a lot of folks in the industry today, because most contracts are only really explored in detail, the data is explored in detail at the end of the contract or when the contract comes up for renegotiation, and that's often too little too late. So this data component is a critical piece of that puzzle. The other 2 things that we do is we're involved in the workflows, providing technology to improve efficiency around the formation of the contract, the managing of exceptions, etc. And the final component of what we do is provide financial services. Primarily, we hold security for a contract. So if a carrier or shipper make a contract and they put security with NISHACS, essentially that provides an incentive for both parties to perform. And if either party fails to perform, there may be penalties or liquidated damages that apply. And of course, we as NISHACS are determining who might be at fault and then using the security as a means to settle any liquidated damages. The good news is this really works. The average contract fulfillment rate, according to the data we have, is in the region of 63%. But when carriers and shippers use the technology that we've produced, it results in a 98% contract fulfillment rate. So it really does work. But let's zoom in on the second component of what we do, which is really around producing a set of data that both the carrier and shipper can trust. Just one point on that. I think as a neutral shipping exchange, basically we're in a good position to act in the interest of both the carrier and the shipper, providing this sort of comprehensive, what we call a system of record. So I'm going to share my screen and just go through the questions because the content is quite heavy and I just want to make it easier for folks to follow along. So if you could just make it possible so I can just share the key questions here on the screen. I'm going to call it that's possible. There we go. All right, so hopefully everyone can see the screen. The first question that we were asked to address is what are the key elements and data gaps, specifically the ones that are integral to our operations. So to make this easy, I just broke it down into 3 components, the first being the primary data elements, the secondary data elements, and the final list of aspirational data elements that we're starting to look and explore as how we integrate. So the primary data elements relate back to the most important components that are necessary to make sure that a contract is clear and that the actual bookings and shipments that take place with that contract reconcile to clear terms. So the first component is obviously we need to have a very clear set of contract terms, including allocations and all kinds of other what we would consider contractual obligations. The second component is we need all the booking request data with the typical standard data fields, origin, destination, etc. Most people from the industry understand what typically fits in there. And there's an EDI standard called EDI 301, which of course we're largely dependent on the EDI message flow for this. The third component is the booking confirmation. Again, with all the standard fields, sorry, I get this wrong. That's the 301. The previous one is the 300. And then the final set of data in the primary bucket is the equipment event, including the container number, the gate in location, gate in time, load date, etc. All of those components. Again, folks familiar with this data set recognize the EDI 315 message. So these are absolutely essential pieces of data for us to perform the service that we do. We have secondary data elements. This includes terminal dates such as cutoffs, the schedule dates of the vessels, both the pro forma and the actual. We're now very much involved in the process of forecasting allocations, and then of course the acceptance of those allocations on the carrier side. And then the other thing which we started to integrate into is ticketing systems, both on the carrier and the shipper end, so that we can keep track of reasons why a contract may not have been performed. And that just adds color to the underlying data set that we use. So that would summarize this secondary bucket of data elements. In the next bucket of data that we are looking to integrate into, it's more complicated than we would like, but we're getting there, which is basically being able to cross-reference vessel AIS data with the schedule data, looking at tariffs, looking at invoice data, and of course, being able to look into the financial flows in order to make sure that payments match up with invoice, and of course, invoice matches up with contract terms. So there are additional values we can create through additional integrations, but that's a little bit more forward-looking. That was the first part of topic one, the two more parts of topic one. So the next part is to what extent you export, to the extent that you export, what are the key data elements that are integral to export? I presume that's exporting of data, not exporting of cargo, because of course we don't, as ourselves, export the cargo. But the data elements that we export, again, we can, first topic, break them down into the reconciliation of what we call actual performance against the contractual obligations. And we do this primarily at 4 levels. So one, we have an overall NQC compliance metric and a dashboard that supports that. Number 2 is the weekly allocations and the compliance therewith. In other words, did the carrier provide the allocation? Did the shipper use the allocation? Very importantly, inside those allocations are bookings, of course, and being able to look into each booking and understand whether rejections, rollover, cancellations, etc. And then very importantly, to be able to roll all of that together and make a comprehensive statement of performance and a summary of what are the potential liquidated damages that may apply. As I mentioned, it's a complex set of data. Sometimes you need color in order to understand why certain things happen. So we try to identify what caused a contract or a booking to go off the contractual obligation. Some of the data allows us to derive, was it because a container missed the gate in? Was the booking not made in time? Was the confirmation not matching what was requested? Was the container gated in on time, booked on time, etc., but just failed to load? So of course we derive that from the data. And then we also have, like I mentioned, a workflow tool which allows us to capture user-generated information. For example, if we can determine that congestion had caused a container not to gate into a terminal on time, or potentially caused a vessel not to berth on time, this information is very relevant because it could trigger an excuse that avoids a liquidated damage or a default. Same is true for customs stops on containers, and there's a list of predefined what we call excuses for why a contract may not be fulfilled according to the obligation. So again, that is captured really through the user interface and then produced back out through a user interface. The question relates to what data do you not currently have that would improve your efficiency performance? Again, this all ties back to the data that relates to the reasons or the color behind a contract not going according to plan. So for example, that would be if we could somehow get a way of tracking what containers were stopped due to customs. Of course, having information about what the congestion is at terminals, like gate wait times outside gates, etc., berthing delays at ports, all of these things attribute back to why contracts may not be fulfilled. It's very helpful for us in the role that we play in helping provide that system of record and determining where a carrier or shipper may not have performed. Moving into topic number 2. So the issue relates here to data transmission and access. So the question is, how do you get data, the data you need from other parts of the supply chain, EDI, API, email, etc. We capture data from every source that we can possibly get. So API, EDI, CSV, Excel, and of course through user-generated input, primarily through the user interface. And then of course we have a data wrangling process where we essentially create a data lake, and then we dedupe the data, we harmonize it, we match it with common used codes, etc., and then we structure it into a centralized database. Again, that is a very important component of what's called the sort of neutral system of record. And then how do you provide the data to your customers? We do it through whatever our customers need, what we call them members, not customers, but whatever our members request. Primarily, it's through a form of API, also through a user interface, but we do use extensively secondary flat files, CSV files, which some of the members have as a means of ingesting data into their systems that aren't fully API enabled. So it really is a broad gambit of modes of data transmission back into our application and also out of our application. So hopefully that color on the data that we use is helpful. And of course, happy to tackle any questions or go deeper into any one of these topics that you might want us to.
Thanks, Gordon. That was fantastic. It really goes to show what information can mean to compliance with contracting. There's a lot of debate about the current system of contracting. I contend that they're really not entering into contracts unless there's some binding element. And anyone who's an attorney and has a Black's Law Dictionary will tell you that a contract usually requires obligations and performance, but we're going to have to move down that path, and taking data elements and marrying them with performance is something that everyone should be looking at. Tim and Tom, I wanted to ask you both this question. What's the situation in China with respect to, I understand that there are issues related to AIS feeds. I believe they're allowing vessels to continue their feeds as are required under International Maritime Organization under the Ship Passenger Security Code, IPSA, but that they're turning off the broadcasts. This, seemingly we'd like to know as much about where vessels are operating as possible, including the Chinese waters. Can any of you, either one of you, want to answer a question on that?
Yeah, I can jump in first if you don't mind, Tim. So yes, so really fundamental issue for us and our customers, naturally. We did a bit of analysis off the back of this, and as a result of the new directive that was passed in China, I think there was kind of it was about a 12% drop in the number of AIS transmissions that we received from the country within the kind of the first few weeks of that coming into force. In terms of how we've responded to it, there's been two sources that we've really called upon to hopefully kind of address that issue and I guess build in a little bit of redundancy into our system, because obviously tracking trade around China is absolutely fundamental for lots of our customers. We are extensively using that Lloyds agent network, which I mentioned as part of my presentation. We have Lloyds agents based in China who are still providing us with, I guess, kind of human intelligence based on vessels that are calling at ports and the sort of things that we're seeing on the ground. Maybe I didn't kind of, I hope I didn't understate it too much as part of my presentation. We source a huge amount of data from that agent network. There's about 24,000 data points we got from them last year alone, in addition to all the other data sources that we're ingesting. We've also quite simply started using our satellite AIS partners around China an awful lot more. Our partnerships with SPA and Allcom have been absolutely key in terms of making sure that the transmissions that we're receiving from China have remained as high as they possibly can, even in light of this this new directive. So that's how we've responded to it.
Yeah, and I can echo what Tom said. The market around China is obviously critical to our operations, and we've been monitoring it very closely. But through the three primary ways that we source our vessel tracking data, we haven't seen much of a drop off in vessel tracking around the area. And predominantly our partnership with ExactEarth really helps us monitor that and make sure that there are no gaps there, because that's absolutely critical, particularly to our government accounts, our defense accounts, navies, and this kind of thing. So we keep a very close eye on it as well.
Yeah, it's a concern. I mean, I don't know why we would be turning off transmission signals or impeding them. The only thing I can think that they're protecting is embarrassment and congestion delays. We're willing to take that in the United States right on the chin and report about it. And so I don't know, but we need to have a comprehensive view. I did want to ask about, we have information about where vessels are, but my sense is we don't really, they're moving so slowly. There's not a lot of information about, what they're planning to do, when they plan to arrive. There's a lot of predictive sort of, shouldn't we just be asking them to sort of report on what they're operating? This is not something that's moving at hundreds of miles an hour. There's a lot of time to make information available on the status of these vessel operations, particularly in the containerized market where you're going back and forth. What do you think about better reporting in terms of status through sort of AIS systems? And could it be done? Could it be achieved very easily, or is this a big change?
Yeah, I'll jump in first if you don't mind again, Tim. But so I can completely echo your comments. I re-entered the maritime world after a slight hiatus about a year ago, but it's one of the things that kind of blew me away getting back into the maritime world, to be honest. That I guess the gaps in terms of AIS data around vessel behaviours, particularly when they're due to arrive at port and what ports they're actually due to arrive in. I'll go back to one of the figures that I quoted in my kind of talk. We found in 2021 that 57% of vessels were sailing with an unclear or inaccurate destination. That's something we can match to our own ports and places database, which is pretty extensive. We also found as well that there are big challenges for customers associated with the fact that things like estimated time to berth and estimated time departure aren't captured in an AIS transmission either. In terms of a solution to it, beyond just agreeing with the sentiments there around, it would be great to have more data available in this as part of an AIS transmission. There's not a huge amount I can offer beyond saying that it's something which we are looking at extensively in terms of what machine learning allows us to do around this area. Looking at previous vessel behavior, looking at trade lanes that they're on, and likely destinations once they get to a certain point in the trade lane. That's something which we're looking at with a lot of interest at the moment, because we think there's a lot of very interesting capabilities that can be built out of machine learning when it comes to predictive vessel behavior. But yeah, that's maybe a conversation for another day.
Do you think that there is maybe a duty or obligation, given the billions of dollars or trillions of dollars of business that's going on, that we provide sort of basic information about what their status is? It's not like an aircraft that's screaming at 500 miles an hour or whatever they scream at. Doesn't it seem relatively simple to you to say that that's sort of something that we should require?
Yeah, it seems like we need some global enforcement mechanism to ensure that the AIS signals are, being populated correctly and accurately, right? Sounds similar to the contract situation that Gordon was outlining. But we have a service called Commodities at Sea that forecasts vessel call activity for non-containerized vessels. So we focus on bulk ships, tankers, various bulk commodities, grains, etc. That uses not just the vessel tracking, but other data sets like sailing schedules, inspection data, and so on, to forecast, with relatively good accuracy what are the primary options for the vessel call.
I think the bulk market is completely different. They're sold as a commodity by the vessel, and so there's. But on the container side, they're going back and forth, and so they pretty much know what their schedule is. So yeah, it's food for thought, and I think we'll have to look closely at what should be provided in terms of these vessel operations. I think I saw statistic was 37% operational, hitting their targets on performance. And I know the industry, I've talked to them a lot, they're frustrated. It's a product of congestion, but better information would at least allow for adjustment and effort here. So Miles, so with respect to the terminals, there are a few critical elements that every shipper needs to know in order to pick up his cargo in a terminal. And from your perspective, do the terminals have all of this information, information that they need to provide a better system of movement through the terminals? Availability, detention, demurrage, free time.
Yeah, I would say so, and that's a great question. Being on the Octopi team, one of the first, fairly certain we were the first software as a service port terminal operating system that was out there from the beginning. Like I was saying, we sat down with the customers and the users of the port terminal. Any software that you're building, it should be, yes, you're sitting down with your customers, but you're sitting down with your customers' customers and making sure that your own customer is super effective and doing really well at what they do. So when we built this terminal operating system, it actually had a very robust API. Any data that you want to push and pull, into it, we were sending alerts via EDI, to the lines, to the consignee shippers, notify parties. you can just drop an email address in there, and the second that cargo touched down, because we replaced that clipboard with, when someone was, seeing this container load list and they're scratching things off and, committing errors, we got rid of that clipboard, entirely, and just, put it on an iPad where you can just put one or two of the check digits, the container before it touches down. And as soon as it touches down, who the crane operator was, which berth area touched down within the terminal, and anyone that needed to be notified about that, either via EDI or email. We were shooting those things out, and we can actually shoot them out immediately, which actually created some problems for some of the other platforms that existed. They're a little more legacy, that have a harder time working with these more modern API, sort of tools. We had what's called a REST API, which is one of the more modern ones that are out there, that's really easy to communicate with. So they certainly exist, but a big part of the private sector here naturally is to protect what they have built, right? So when we were acquired by Navis, from my experience, right, naturally, like any other company, they're going to protect what they built, and so you're seeing the proliferation of Octopi slowly take over. I think they're in they've landed in 30 terminals. You can ask anyone from Navis there to give you more perspective there. But getting access to that data may be as simple as requesting it from Navis. So sometimes you just have to go and ask for that data from their operators, or push. The local FCBF here in Miami, the Florida Customs Brokerage and Forwarding Association, has done a great job of sort of banding together, and also working hard to kind of come to the terminals and say, hey, we've got all your customers here, and we're all asking for this data. Because another problem that I've seen, not only here in the US, but globally, in these landlord, tenant port situations, it's really easy for the terminals to blame inefficiencies on one another. And kind of similar to what you mentioned about China, everyone kind of wants to keep that, a little bit under wraps, when they're not as productive as they could be, or inefficient. So it's really easy for the terminals to blame one another. When they're not blaming one another, they can, blame the port authority, and the port authority can vice versa, can point back at the terminals and blame them. And you see that quite often around the United States. And I do think that once you get this, the standardized data, format, framework, whatever it might be, I think honestly, Commissioner Bensel, it will be a game changer. And a lot of the costs around connecting systems and getting the supply chain visibility just comes down to how, like you guys already know, and like everyone has testified, how easy it is, to get the data that I need. And certainly the raw ingredients are there. And I think we're finally, hitting that head that we needed to make that step. Yeah.
Thanks, Mas. I'll do one more question with Gordon. We've gone a little bit over, but using the prerogative of the person who's asking questions, I'll continue and then release you all. Gordon, you mentioned a lot of the elements that you monitor pursuant to the contracting process. And one of the variables that's been really challenging recently has been the trucking situation, both with the equipment issues on chassis and trucking. And it's a variable that changes from location to location. Any thoughts on, and because you need wheels, no matter what you're going to do, you're going to need wheels to move cargo from a terminal to rail or ultimate destination. Any thoughts on how to account for this in terms of your contract and moving forward, and how big a challenge is it?
So I'll explain how it works currently, and then we can sort of hypothetically imagine how it could work in a world of complete data. But of course, to the point that you made, when a shipper cannot get access to a chassis and therefore cannot load a container and return it to the terminal, and therefore cannot fulfill a contract obligation, this, of course, it's unfair to hold a shipper accountable for that. The shipper doesn't own or operate the chassis pool. And this is something which is specifically addressed in our rule book. There is a rule that deals with primarily terminals that require specific chassis in situations whereby those chassis are not available in the market. We've seen this circumstance arise a few times. There was a case in Chicago a few months back, or actually a few years back, where this was a big issue. Now, the way that we determine the rule, first of all, it's done through a governance process, which is actually overseen by the Federal Maritime Commission's, one of the agreements we have on file, whereby there's a member council that looks at each of the rules and how they're enforced, and basically determines what is the right methodology and what is the right set of data in order to establish what we call an excuse. And that member council is comprised of 3 carrier members, 3 shipper members, and 3 NVOCC members. And so therefore it's fair. They're always trying to look at a solution which is going to sort of optimize the best interests of all the parties involved. So those rules are very important. That governance process is very important. The next question is, well, how do you get enough data to know whether this is qualifying as one of those excuses covered in the rules? The way it works today is, as I mentioned, we have workflows in the application. There's a user interface that allows shippers to flag reasons why they cannot gate in on time. And one of the reasons they can produce is, well, there were no wheels or chassis in that period. The good thing about operating at a relatively large scale is that when we see a lot of shippers in a region raising the same excuse, we know there really is a problem with the pool in that region. If it's just one user or one shipper in one region and it's an isolated event, that lends itself to being more of a case where the shipper just perhaps failed to secure the chassis when they needed it. It doesn't indicate that the entire pool is being depleted. So really, we can somehow derive that based on just how broad spread some of these issues become. So it's not ideal. It requires some human intervention. It requires some sort of analysis of the data. Fortunately, it doesn't happen all that often. But if we look at a hypothetical situation where there was abundant data on all these chassis pools, et cetera, it would be very helpful in the sense that we could proactively look at markets or pools where there's a limit, and we could then even notify parties ahead of time. Again, one of our really important missions is to improve the contracting experience by trying to give people information so that they can course correct during the life cycle of the contract. So not only would we avoid such situations where a shipper or carrier goes into default or creates excuses for such thing, but we could actually be part of the solution and help identify gaps where pools may be depleted and sort of ultimately allow the carriers, the shippers, the chassis providers to be able to course correct that before contracts go into default. Again, how long would it take for that to happen? How readily available would the data on each chassis and each pool be available? I don't know the answer to that question, but certainly it would be a wonderful scenario if we could get to that point.
Yeah, well, I think the answer is the more data you have, the more you can course correct. Could you get us the information on EDI 300, 301, and 315? Just is that readily available that you can share with us or not?
Sure. So these are EDI standards. And,
okay.
So most...
They're just the standard EDIs.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, no problem. No need to do that. Well, Gordon, Miles, Tom, and Tim, you've been great participants today. I really think this was an interesting panel discussion. Value your insights. We're moving forward. We're getting ready to try to start the planning process for the Maritime Transportation Data Summit that we'll be doing in June. I think we'll be in touch with all of you to see if we can arrange a way to get further insights from you through the process of creating our report. Again, great job. And I think we've exceeded everything by 13 minutes. But I think it was well worth it. So, with that, Carl, I think we can close it.
Thank you very much.